wind up our discussion today and
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. I hope everybody is caffeined up or fueled up for the rest of the afternoon, inshallah. This is going to be the third and last lecture for this module. Is my voice too loud? Okay, so this is going to be the third and last lecture for the Systems Dynamics module. And but hopefully this is the beginning of your journey and engagement with Systems Dynamics. So this was really meant to be an overview to sort of show you what the method is about, what the key concepts are, and what are the strengths as well as limitations of this method. In this lecture, I'm going to spend talking about, in detail, about a certain type of growth which we find to occur in many systems and many real systems that we deal with and care about. And in fact, before the beginning of the lecture, somebody asked me that how does the growth rate change, or do we have cases when the growth rate is the effective growth rate changes? So I told them to sort of hold on to that question. So now we're going to get that answer. Okay. All right. So a very common type of growth that we find for many real systems is something that we call logistic growth. Okay, it's a special type of growth function. It was, this was developed, almost 100 years ago, in the 20th century. In plain English, it is called S-shaped growth, and if you want to sound fancy and sophisticated, we'll call it logistic growth. Okay, it's called S-shaped growth because the function looks something like this. It looks something like a stretched out S over time. Okay, so essentially the growth starts off something looking like this, and then it sort of saturates. Okay, this is a function. This is a curve that you will find many real systems to behave with. And underlying this structure, underlying sort of this time dynamic, are two loops that are operating. There is an exponential loop. There's a reinforcing loop or a positive feedback loop that's operating that leads to this exponential rise initially. But then over time, sort of a negative feedback loop kicks in, which then balances off this exponential rise and then makes it saturate, going towards the goal city case. Okay, so there are two loops that basically become dominant or less dominant over time, depending on how the growth unfolds. But essentially, the common pattern of logistic growth, or the underlying structure, is that first there is a positive reinforcing loop that dominates the behavior, and then over time, a negative feedback loop starts dominating, and then collectively they lead to this type of time-based response that you will see for the system. This curve, or this pattern, as I mentioned, is often called the S-shaped growth or logistic growth, and it is given by this general form, in which essentially the net growth rate, right, the net fractional growth rate of the function is of this type, where G is the net growth rate. Okay, so what do I mean by net growth rate? So for example, in the case when we had, this type of stock, right, of population P, right, it has some birth rate, right, let's say B, okay, and it has some death rate D, so then the net rate is B minus D, okay, so that's the net growth. So when B minus D is positive, the population increases because there are more births than deaths, right? This was the inflow minus the outflow, right? We talked about that in the previous. So that's what I mean by net. By net, I'm essentially subtracting the in minus the out. So, but here, in this case, the net growth rate is actually not linear. In this case, when I'm showing you sort of a linear representation, it looks something like this. And what do these variables mean? Well, G star is essentially a constant, okay? And P is the population level, so we're using population as the variable here. And C is the carrying capacity of the environment in which this population growth is happening, is occurring, okay? So by definition, carrying capacity is a concept that comes from ecology, it comes from natural science, and so essentially is the amount of population it can, it's essentially for a given environment, it's the level of population it can support, okay, for a given species. So carrying capacity is the maximum number of population of any given entity that you care about that can be supported within an environment that we're studying, very broadly speaking. I'm not an ecologist. If I messed up the exact definition, please hold me to it. But essentially, that's the idea of carrying capacity. How much population can the environment support, okay? And essentially, what this is showing is that in logistic growth, what happens is that you have this ratio of P over C, right? So the population divided by the carrying capacity. So as population increases over time and it approaches the carrying capacity, okay, then what happens? P, as it becomes equal to C, right, then what happens to this term? It becomes 0. So the net growth rate becomes 0, right? That was the whole idea, right? And typically that is what we find to happen in reality, right? Populations will not exceed, or at least exceed for a given period of time, above what the carrying capacity of the environment is, all right? And if you actually go through some neat algebra, what you find is that this was, this is how we model the growth rate, G star, which is a constant, multiplied with 1 minus P over C. So you can see that the growth rate is a function of the state. This is what we had earlier on as well, right? So the population increase was a function of, the fractional birth rate times the population itself, right? So here we divided by the carrying capacity to make it more realistic. And what we have is this type of a differential equation, where dP dt, right? So the net growth rates or rate of change of the population is given by this. So P again is, the rate of change is proportional to the state of the system itself. We already talked about that. And what is this G? This G is this function right here, which is a constant G star multiplied by 1 minus P over C. Okay, we've substituted the value of G in here. So this becomes G star over this times P. And when you multiply that out, this is what you get. So dP over dt is given by this type of formulation. So P is the state of our system, remember that, right? So P is the level of the population, it's the state of our system. And in logistic growth, you have this type of general formulation. So G star minus P minus G star P squared over C. Okay, now this type of function has some unique or interesting characteristics. So at the beginning of time in the population that we care about, let's say, I don't know, yeast in a Petri dish or so on and so forth, is small as compared to C, right? So the P of any given T in the beginning of time is much less than C, okay? So it's a quantity that is much, much less as compared to the carrying capacity of the environment. When this is the case, this quantity is pretty much, negligible. You can sort of ignore it because, you're squaring it and then, you're dividing it. This becomes negligible, and essentially this is the quantity that is dominant in driving the behavior. And when you have this type of relationship going on, this is exponential growth, right? D over P, this is, E to the G star, right? This is basically the state of the system. The rate of change is dependent on the state itself. That is what we just saw. So this is what happens here. Initially, when the population is small, it basically is able to grow rapidly within an environment. But then as it grows, this ratio P over C is now becoming more and more important because now P is approaching C, okay? And then eventually, when it becomes, it reaches a certain level, actually, this point of inflection is actually, you can work out the algebra, essentially half the carrying capacity. When P reaches half the carrying capacity, then it starts to invert. Then the growth, essentially the negative feedback loop comes in, it becomes dominant, and this is not as dominant, it is slowed down because now you have a P squared term, right? And now P is a bigger number now, so you can't sort of ignore this P over C is now not a negligible term because P is now getting close to C, okay? Previously P was much less than C, so you could ignore it, but over time as P is increasing, this term is now becoming very important, and hence the negative dynamics come into play. And the interplay essentially, leads to this type of time behavior that you see. And this was worked out, almost a century ago, as I said. So this is a very well-known process, a very well-known curve, a very well-known trend. You can actually, in this rare case, work out a closed form representation of P of T over time. So you can get a closed form formulation to represent the P as a function of time here by solving this differential nonlinear first order differential equation. In many cases, it doesn't work out nicely. In this particular logistic world, it does. And this is the closed form solution. So why do we care about this? Well, we care about this because this type of function or this type of growth helps us explain or study a lot of phenomena or processes that are important to us. So I'll start with, the first one in which it was, widely applied, and that is the spread of infectious diseases. Okay. So I'm going to start with diseases. I'm certainly, have nothing to do with biology. I only took one class of biology in the entire undergraduate, curriculum, and here I am talking about, infectious diseases. That to some degree speaks about the power of, mathematics and systems dynamics, that it actually helps us explain a lot of phenomena, not just, physical systems that we study, but many different types of systems. So we'll start with spread of infectious diseases because that's where this type of modeling was actually applied and used for a long period of time. So that's where we're going to begin. In infectious diseases, we are going to essentially, make the following set of assumptions. Many of them are close to reality. The first one is that the rate of new cases rises exponentially. It reaches a peak and then it falls. Typically, that's how an epidemic or a disease, infectious disease, will run through a population, okay? So essentially, many people will start falling sick, it will reach some kind of peak, and then it will fall. This is, number of new infections, okay? Number of new infections. So the epidemic will spread, it'll peak, and then over time, the number of new infections will fall. Hopefully, it'll come to zero. Why does it come to zero? Because it has actually spread through the population, right? So there are no more new people to infect. So the cumulative number of cases will follow an S-shaped curve. So you remember in the morning when we had this little pulse as the input, right? Right? We did an experiment, and then what happened to the output? Right? It did an integration, right? So here also in the cumulative cases, actually the cumulative cases are going to go look something like this. The number of people infected. This is number of new infections, and this is number of people infected at any given point in time. This is the cumulative number, right? This is the stock, and this is the flow, right? Epidemics, especially infectious diseases, you can consider them to start with a single patient, the patient zero, as it's called. And the disease can spread through contact. That's why they're infectious disease, right? Because of the spread through contact with an infected person. And as more and more people get infected, more people catch the disease, right? So as the population becomes more and more infected, the probability of, a non-infected person becoming infected is going to increase because they're getting in contact with all the people who have the infection. So think about, plagues, right? They are infectious diseases, and, they run through societies with very devastating effects. Or Ebola, right, that broke out in Africa last year, and so on and so forth. And then the rate of the new infection will fall when the pool of uninfected people decreases, right? Because now there's just not enough people left who are healthy. So that is why the rate of new infections is falling, because people who are going to be infected have already become infected, okay? So here's actual real data taken from, the BBC, right, of Ebola cases reported in 2016, right? It was a very serious and sobering event, right? So in Guinea, in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, and you can see on the y-axis it shows essentially weekly reported Ebola cases, right? So new cases that are being reported every week, and right, they're increasing over time, right? And then they sort of peak, and then they eventually come down. Of course, it's a little messy. This is, real data, not a neat little drawing that I'm making, on the board. Real data is always like that. But you can see the overall trend, right? So it follows this pattern, right? It has a peak and then it will fall down, and then so forth, all right? So, so this type of, system can be modeled using systems dynamics and has been modeled with differential equations, right? And a famous model that has been used to explain the time behavior of the system is called the SI model. Okay, it's a very sort of, widely used model. It's used for, understanding about systems, learning about systems, and it also applies with a little bit more sophistication that I'll get into, but let's start with the basic model, the SI model, which essentially is about the spread of infectious diseases, in which you consider two stocks within a population. Okay, so one stock is of susceptible people. So people who are healthy, but they are susceptible to the infection. Okay, they can get sick. They're healthy, but they can get sick. Okay, they can catch the disease. And the other stock is of infected people within that population, the people who have become infected. All right. So that is why the name SI, susceptible infection. It's called the SI model because it models two stocks, susceptible and infected population. The people who are infected are removed over time, right, from the stock S and are included in the stock I. All right. So in a stock and flow diagram, how does this look like? It looks something like this. So you have a stock S, right, and it drains out with some type of infection rate, which is then filling the stock of infected people. Okay. Essentially, that's what's happening in this model. We made some simplifying assumptions. We assume that people who become infected stay infected indefinitely. Okay, so this is the convenient assumption we're making to make our model simple to work with. You can think about perhaps it's a chronic infection. So once you get it, you'll just have it, and you can never fully recover. But that's sort of a limitation of the SI model, and we will work on relaxing that later. But for the purpose of discussion, let's keep this assumption. So, second, the infectious disease spreads when a susceptible person comes in contact with an infected person, right? So let's say we're talking about influenza or even Ebola, right? So they're transmitted through, in influenza, if you cough or sneeze, the air will carry the germs and so forth. So if you just come into contact or proximity with an infected person, then we have a chance of getting that infection. And we label that infection rate as IR. Okay, people in the community interact at a certain rate, and that contact rate is C. Okay, so on average, a school-going kid will come in contact with 30 kids per day, kind of a thing, right? Or a person who is going out and working in their office, depending on the size of their office and how many of their co-workers are, you can sort of get a sense of how many people you come in contact with in your daily life. So that's sort of a representation of this contact rate. So people in the community interacting on average with how many other people. So maybe in a rural community, if farmers are living in their own big farms and not really interacting with a wider number of people, then maybe their contact number C is very low because all they meet are the perhaps family members. But in urban areas, you actually are coming in contact with a lot more people, perhaps when they're commuting, in the public transportation, in your workplace, in schools, and maybe others. You get the idea, right? So the C can vary depending on the community or the context you're looking at. The total number of people in the community is fixed. This is again an assumption of the model. So we keep the population fixed. So people are not coming in or going out. Okay, so we keep the population constant, and we denote that as N. All right. So then, what's the relationship between N, S, and I's? Can we write an equation between N, S, and I? So N is basically S plus I, because that is how we defined it, right? So the whole population is partitioned into two groups, either susceptible people or infected people. And collectively, they'll make the whole population, right? All right. And then if infected people are not quarantined, right? So if people are getting infected and, they're still going about their business, and if the kid gets, the flu, they're still going to school the next day rather than being told to stay at home. Actually, towns in implemental policies, they will forbid kids from, coming to school if there's a virus or something going along. But anyway, let's assume there's no quarantining of any kind, there's no restriction on contacts that happen, even if you have an infected person. Then the probability that any random encounter between two people, will be between an infected individual and will be with an infected individual is I over N, right? So I is your infected population, and N is the total population. Okay, this will represent the likelihood that you will encounter on a random, any two people encountering each other, one of the individuals will be infected. Okay, it's just I over N. So let's say in the population, 30% of the people are infected, essentially saying that you have 30% chance of coming in contact with an infected person. All right. The infectivity I of the disease is the probability that a person, after coming in contact with an infected individual, will actually contract the disease. Okay, so this is the chance that you meet an infected person. But the probability that you will actually catch the infection is going to be, there's another number that you multiply this quantity with. Because just because you meet an infected person doesn't mean 100% surety that you will catch the infection. There's some chance that you will catch the infection, right? If they sneeze close to you or do something, right, that you will catch the virus, right? So we call that as I, okay, the infectivity I, which basically is a representation of how infectious the disease is, right? So Ebola actually had a very high value of I. It's extremely infectious disease. So if you came in contact with a person with Ebola, you had a much higher probability of actually contracting Ebola as well, as compared to perhaps some other disease where the infectivity might be low. It's infectious, but the infectivity might be low, meaning that the chance of actually contracting. Okay, so we use these sort of variables to describe the situation and write some equations. Okay, so susceptible population is S, okay, the index number of people. The infected population is I, okay, number of people. And the total population is CPI, and it's the decimal sign, right? The contact frequency is how many persons you meet per person per day, right? So for a person per day, so a person per day, one person per day, how many people are you? Okay, so that's like persons per person per day, which actually ends up being one per day, 1 over 100. It works out that way. Susceptible contact is this, right? S times C. Because you need the contact frequency. The probability of contact between infected and uninfected person is I over N, as I just described. And this quantity defines the contact between infected and uninfected people. Right? So this is the chance, probability of contact between an infected and uninfected person times you need susceptible contact. And you multiply that out with I, which is the infectivity, and collectively we define this quantity as the infection rate. So the infection rate is proportional to the infectivity of the disease. This is something that is a property of the disease itself. I is the number of people who have become infected. The more people there are, the more chances that you catch a disease, infection rate goes up. And this is susceptible population and the contact frequency, which is, again, a characteristic of the community. What type of community you're dealing with on average, how many people are coming in contact. Okay? And the units are some people per day, because this is infection rate, right? So the units should work out the people per day. You can do the multiplication and make sure the units are working out this way. All right? So, can anybody notice something interesting here? Right? So this is what we have for our infection rate, and you can see that the infection rate, which is the IDT, is proportional to the level of infected people themselves, right? So here's where you get the situation again. So you can actually substitute for S, N minus I, so we put that in here, and we collect all the terms and make it nice and neat, and you get basically this type of formulation for your rate of infection. All right, so it is proportional to the infected population, right, minus I squared over N. So the same logistic representation that I showed you before, where instead of I, we had P, right, and it was proportional to the state itself. The dP dt was basically equal to G times P minus, right, G times P squared over T. We have a similar formulation here, where you have the first term, right, which leads to the exponential growth initially, and then you have the second term, which leads to the decay or decline once the number of infected people starts approaching the population, the total population. So the carrying capacity of the disease here in this case is the total population, right? How many people can get the disease? It's essentially limited by the number of people in the population. So that's why we have N over. Okay? All right, so we developed this model, all right, these equations to sort of describe our situation, to describe what we're modeling, and we can use a stock and flow diagram to represent that. All right, so we have the stock of S, we have the stock of I, and we have the infection rate IR, And these are these constants that we define. So infectivity I, the contact rate C of the total population. And these linked polarities are just indicating what each of these constants does to the infection rate, okay? And we made these key assumptions, that total population remains the same, there is no recovery of the patients, right? We have a constant contact rate C, right? No quarantining and so forth. And all of these collectively lead to one key implication in this model, which is that once a single infected individual appears in the community, over time, everybody will get infected over a period of time. If it's simulated long enough, everybody will eventually catch the disease because nobody's recovered, right? So once you have infected, you are counted as an infected individual, right? So over time, everybody will contract the disease in this particular model. All right. So we talked about epidemics and diseases, but epidemics is actually a very powerful idea because they can actually be used to represent many different types of processes, and technology adoption is actually one of them, right? So the adoption of a technology or the uptake of a product can actually be thought of as an epidemic. Think about cell phones. Think about the new cool app that you download and tell your friends to download, and so on and so forth. So actually, a lot of the processes of technology take up, and particularly for consumer technologies, you can use a similar model, which is called actually the base adoption model. It's a very famous model developed in 1969 by Base. He's in marketing, in marketing. And it's widely used to actually look at how technology would be adopted within a community, okay? This could be, cable subscribers in a community. This could be, perhaps a new car that a new showroom has opened up and they're trying to sell to a city. This could be, a new company that graduate, establishes a smart sense, right? So they're making smart sensors and they want to sell to the farmers in a particular district. You can, think of any product that you care to model, and you can sort of start to look at the system. All right, so here I'm going to show you VentSim. For those of you who are interested, I mentioned that you can go ahead and download a free basic version. It's available for free download online. They have a professional version as well, which you have to pay for, which has a lot more features. But at least the basic one lets you get started and look and do a lot of interesting things. So I didn't have time yesterday to go about showing you how to create causal loop diagrams. But I'm not going to spend the time here making one of them, but I will show you how to sort of, create them. This is the toolbar in VentSim, and let me show you as I speak. So here. So there are a number of these tools, and I'll just very quickly show you what each of them does. So in order to draw a causal loop diagram that I've done here, you need essentially to use this variable tool. Okay, so you can click on it, and then if you press anywhere, the box opens up, and you can, sort of write the name of the variable. Okay, and then if you press somewhere else, you can then create another variable. Okay, and so forth. Okay. And then you can link them up by essentially using the causal link arrow. So you click on one, and then you click on the other, and you put down a causal link from 1 to 2. Okay? And then you can go nice and fancy using this hand tool, right? You can make it a little curved. That's good convention, good CLE drawing practice. And then you can actually right-click, and there's a message box that appears that you're not seeing on your screen, but I am seeing it on my computer. So, but in any case, you can go through. Let's see if I can move this here. No. All right. Anyway, so you can do a right click. I have 2 split screens, and it's not showing up over there. But anyway, you get a menu, and you can choose the polarity, and you can set basically a number of properties about the causal link, and then you can go ahead and sort of draw the diagram, if you will. So this is about drawing CLE, where essentially you're working with this tool and the color link tool and the add tool and so forth. But the comments tool is also interesting. It lets you, basically provide comments. Again, you don't see the dialog box here, so that's fine. And the nice tool, if you want to delete a variable, how many people have played Pac-Man, by the way? Okay, so, so that's good to know. I didn't know it was still being said. So you use the Pac-Man tool, okay, to sort of, delete the variable or delete the element. All right. Okay, so that's that. But now I'm going to talk about stocks and flows. This was just to demonstrate how you would go about, putting CLDs in Vensim. But we're going to, look at actually models that you can simulate. So when we do that, let me open up the model that I have here. So I have this model that I've already put together. It follows essentially, the diagram that I showed you earlier. And I'm wondering how I'm going to show you the dialog boxes because they're not somehow appearing on screen. But let me see if I can try. So let's see here. So these boxes or these stocks are drawn by the stock tool, which is this one. Okay, so this is just a regular variable, a constant, auxiliary variable, that's what we call it. And these are stocks that have this box. If I click on this and I put this here, I get prompt. If I type in the name of the variable, you see that it created a stock from me. Basically, that means that when I tie in an arrow to it, Vensim will automatically assign an integration function to that box. All right, so that's how it works. And if I want, I can go ahead. Well, let me actually just do that real quick. I can, sort of draw out another stock. Okay, and I'm going to say stock in. All right, and then I will connect it from here to here. And you saw that the tool that I used, so the tool that I used was so I use basically this flow tool to connect the two stocks, all right? And when I do that, you can see that if I click on the equation tool, right, these two become black, which basically means that it's asking me to put down equations for them, all right? And if I click on it, it will show me the equation dialog box that I can then essentially populate and see it is already assigned an integration function to it because that's the definition of that variable itself, and it will ask me for the initial value at which it will start the integration, and it will give me a list of variables I can choose from to add to that integration function, because if I have auxiliary variables feeding into it, they will all show up in that list actually. I didn't make any auxiliary variables. I'll show you for the others how it comes up, but I just wanted to show you how to enter in an equation. So anything that's missing in equation will come up with a black box, okay? And then you go ahead and you assign, the units and so on and so forth. And you can also choose between some nonlinear functions. So Vensim will give you a library of nonlinear functions that you can also encode, okay? So you can actually add delays, you can add a fixed delay, other types of delays. It has, these if and then else statements that you can add, min, max, all of these typical nice nonlinear functions that we need when we are creating simulations or when we are describing how a system operates in a nonlinear way. Okay, so you can use all of that. Okay, so but let me just close this out, and I'm going to delete these two so just to demonstrate. Oh, and then for the flow rate also you can describe an equation, which I'm not going to do right now. But let me just show you what the equations for this model look like that I've made here. All right, so I'm going to click on the equation tool. Nothing becomes black. It basically means that I've already populated these items with equations. And let me show you what they look like. If I click on this one, you will see. Let me do one thing. Let me just sit down. All right, so. And yes, actually that's a good idea. I can sit on the side. Because this split screen is making it a little difficult, which I didn't anticipate. It's fine. I'll just run this way, chair around. It's okay. Yeah. All right. I didn't realize my computer won't project that. So here I have the equation that you can see for the potential adopters. Okay. This was a stock, and you can see that the initial level that I've specified is the total population, which I basically picked from a set of variables you can choose from. You can choose initial variables. Okay, so if I click on that, this is really not good. All the dialog box is still up the other side. Okay, so if I clicked on initial variables, it gave me a list of things that I could choose from, right? It doesn't know which ones are feasible ones, so I really need to choose intelligently. So I chose, initial population. So it'll give me a list of things that have been defined in the model. Okay, so that's basically how it operates. Okay, if I cancel that. So that's how total population comes in, and it's giving me a list of variables to choose from, right? So potential adopters and adoption rate. And in the integration, I have a negative of adoption rate. Why? Because it's draining, right? It's an outflow, right, from the potential adopters. Okay, so that's what this is. The units are people and so forth. Okay, and I'm going to click on OK. And then let me show you an equation for, let's say, contacts between adopters and potential adopters, right? So this is sort of an auxiliary variable, right, that is taking in these two inputs and it's giving the adoption rate out. So if I click on the equation and I click on this variable here, this is what my equation dialog box looks like. All right. So it's essentially the multiplication, because it doesn't know if I want to subtract these two variables or multiply them or run some kind of nonlinear function on them. It just knows that these two variables are the inputs. So it gave me a choice of these two variables to choose from, okay, based on the link diagram that I had drawn. But the specific formulation is what I type in. Okay, so I select the two variables and I type in that it's a multiplication. So you see that. But I could have chosen any other type of formulation as well. But they're multiplying in our model, so that's what I have here. And units, people per day, right, and so forth. And you can sort of go through the process and set up the model like this, all right? And basically, before you run the model, in fact, before you start creating a model, you will get something like this first screen that says model settings. I should have showed that way too, but that's fine. In which you can set the time of your simulation horizon and the time step. All right. So this is your time step. I'm going to look at it, basically every 6 hours, right? So 0.25. My units are in days, right? And my time step is 0.25, basically between 6 hours, right? Integration type, this is what type of solver I want to use to do the integration, right? That it's going to do. What my initial time is, and you can set many other different types of things that I'm not going to go into, but essentially model settings allow you to do all of these things, all right? Okay, so I have that, and then once I have basically, completed entering in all the equations and I've defined my simulation settings and so forth, now I can simulate, all right? And I'm going to simulate and notice that, the total population that I've set, let me just show that to you, is basically 350, all right? So I'm just saying we're looking at at a community of 350 people. Okay, maybe this is a small village somewhere or something. All right, so this is the total population that I've said. Okay, so and now I run the simulation, and I can actually now click on a variable that I want to see its level, what happened over time. So let's say I want to look at how many adopters were there, all right, and I click on the graph tool, and it'll show that after I run the simulation, okay? So basically it's showing me how quickly, how many people adopted the technology over time, given the specific parameters I provided in the simulation, right? So essentially this blue line is showing that. Actually this contact frequency 8 was the name of the simulation I put in, so that's why this is showing it like this. And you can now you can play with the parameters, right, and see how things speed up or slow down, or what the impact of some other parameters might be, right, and so on and so forth. And you can start making things, you know, sort of interesting as well. So this little feature that you see here is something to add a little twist. So what I've created here is a shadow variable of the adoption rate. Okay, so this was the adoption rate. Okay. And essentially, we create a shadow variable using this function here, all right? And this adoption rate here is essentially a copy of this variable. So a shadow variable in Benson is essentially a copy of a variable somewhere else in the model. And now using that copy, I can create another structure. So that's the you know, sort of a need for these shadow variables. Otherwise, things will get really messy if I have to connect everything back up, you know, to this adoption rate. So I need the value of adoption rate. So I create a copy, and then basically I connect it to this additional feature, which I call, you know, new reported cases, which then feeds into cumulative reported adoption. So here, the way I've drawn it, the adoption rate and new reported cases are the same. But I could actually put in an equation to perhaps introduce a delay or introduce some kind of other non-linearity that may exist, maybe biases, right? So as the cases are coming in, maybe our hospital system, you know, isn't working as well. So the reported cases are different from the actual, you know, infections, or in this case, if there's a technology, maybe your company isn't, you know, doing the right surveys or doesn't have the right information on how many people have bought the product. So you can now capture some of those issues or some of those things with this little feature that I've added, right? And here is the cumulative recorded adoption, right? So now this, in theory, could be different than that, right? So in some sense here, we are trying to capture reality, things that are happening as is, based on the physical model that we defined. And here, we can start introducing some social elements of delays or biases or limits and so on and so forth, and to see what it is that we will perceive about here, okay? All right, so that's a little note on that. And I think in the morning I showed you how to sort of, you know, change the different parameters and so forth. Let me do that again. You do this by essentially clicking on this button, Synthesin, right? And essentially what that does is it creates, actually let me cancel this out, and first rename this something else, because otherwise it will be like this. So let's call it, you know, last one. This is the first simulation we're running, okay? And then I'm going to run this, okay? And now you can see the slider bars come up. And I can now quickly, you know, sort of change things around. And you can see that actually the shape of the output is actually displayed within the stock itself. So it's actually kind of neat. So if I change these, let's say I increase, what happens if I increase the contact frequency? What's going to happen to my shape of the adopters? Well, what should I see? What should I expect to see? It should quickly converge. If I increase my contact frequency, basically means that more and more people are actually positively impacting my adoption rate, right? Because it's a multiplication, the way I enter these things, right? So if I increase the contact frequency and make instead of 1, so keep an eye on that blue curve in the adopters, you know, little box, and you'll see that now it's quickly converging, right? Right, rapidly increasing, right? Now, of course, this is kind of nice to see, but I really want to get the real data. So what do? I use this tool, which is the slider tool right over here, actually graphic tool. I'm going to put that here. Okay. Okay, so a little technical glitch here, but I wanted to show you this tool basically. What this tool does is essentially it puts a graph on the main pane, and then I can sort of see in real time what the simulation looks like, as I was showing you for the city modeling and so forth. But let me just skip out of that. The other tool to use is if you click on, let's say cumulative reported adoption, and if you simply click on the graph here, let me show you in detail what that is. You can look at the tabular data as well, right? So it's actually showing you the tabular data over time, okay? So for each time step, what the exact values were, and you can actually export it out and so forth, if you can use it, and then you can sort of really sort of analyze, what was going on. You can also look at, this tool, which is kind of neat. This will give you, sort of a summary of stocks that are there, so cumulative reported adoption and new reported cases and so forth. So this will allow, and you can see for the different runs, it is giving me a comparison, right? So class 1, we actually increased the contact rate, if you remember, right? And now you can sort of compare the difference, right? So look at the difference in the new reported cases, right? So we get a very sudden peak because they're getting more infections, right? And that leads to this very fast conversion, okay? So you can play with the parameters, name your run accordingly, and then start doing comparisons between the results. As I showed you, you can look at the numeric data and export that out as well. Okay, you can use the run comparison tool as well, which will, sort of give you a report of various, levels. So actually, we had contact frequency has changed in value, right? So it's giving us a report of what's the difference between the two runs. Right? So sometimes if you forget what exactly was changed, it's giving you a report of that. So that's the compare runs tool over there. And then there are other tools as well which will show you how a particular variable behaves within a model logically or how it's structured. So if I click on sort of adoption rate, right, and then if I click on this tool here, it will show me how adoption rate is connected with other variables in the model. So this is a simple model, you can see it right away, but for more complex models, these tools are actually pretty useful, right, and so forth. So I won't go through all the details. You can sort of play around and sort of experiment with this. But the key thing that I wanted to show you here is that it's a useful tool to quickly simulate systems, and people use it for even more complex models and so forth. But really, for more serious modeling, you need the professional version. As you could see, my tool wasn't working, the graph tool, I don't know why, but it typically does. But nonetheless, the basic version is fairly useful. All right. Any other features? I think I already pointed out to you in the morning that you can load data sets and so forth, and so on. So with that, I think we're a little short on time also, so let me wrap up with a few remaining slides that I wanted to go over. But hopefully, in the handout that you have, I've actually walked through creating a model. So I have screenshots, right, that you should see in Venson and what equations to put in. So those of you who are interested, you can walk yourself through and follow the instructions and create your model and then sort of play with it, all right? So let me cancel out this. Let me restart. Okay, so we worked our way through all of this. Okay, so here are the slides as you can see, right? I've already shown you all of this stuff. You know, you can add comments in your definition, so it helps later on to understand what's going on. Okay. And one key thing to remember, the initial condition for adopters, which is our stock, right? We have two stocks, right, of potential adopters and adopters when we're talking about technology. The initial condition for adopters has to be 1. If it is 0, it'll never start. There has to be that patient 0, right? There has to be that infected person. There has to be that person who has already adopted the technology that then sets the cycle in motion. Okay, so if you put that to 0, you'll just keep getting 0 in your simulation and you'll be pulling your hair out as to what's going on. So make sure that you put the initial condition as 1 for the adopter. Okay, effectively out. All right, you can do run model checks and so forth. Shadow variables I've already covered. All right, and all right, so you sort of see, I take you through, you know, in your slides, you can sort of look at them and so forth. Okay, so now let's make things a little interesting. I have 5 minutes to wrap up, or just a couple minutes to wrap up. So let me do this really quickly. So far we played with a very simple model, right? We have adopters and, you know, potential adopters, or we have sick people and we have healthy people, and that's about it. And once you've got the technology, now you're stuck with it. You hate your iPhone and you don't want anything to do with it again, right? So what do? Well, maybe you bought a Galaxy 7 and now it's catching fire. So what do? Well, in reality, what we do is that we either discard the item, or people who are sick, hopefully they will recover. So essentially, this is a better representation of reality, the SIR model. So it is susceptible, infected, and recovered. Okay, so you can recover from a technology fad, or you can reject basically, or retire a product that you may have purchased, right? Or you may recover from a disease, so that's the idea of R, okay? So susceptible, infected, and recovered. And here now we have 2 stocks of the population. I'm sorry, 3. We have susceptible population, infectious population, and a recovered population. And here now you actually have 2 independent stocks in this system. So previously, although in reality we had put in 2 boxes, right, susceptible and infected, in reality the degrees of freedom were just one. This was a first order system because, you know, you could represent S and I as a function of each other because the population was constant, right? So we had written this equation. The total population is the sum of S and I, right? So you could write basically S as a function of, you know, the other, right? They weren't independent. S and I were actually linked because the population being the same. So it was really a first order system, and that's why you weren't seeing, you know, fancy oscillation or anything of that sort. But in this model, now you have 2 independent stocks. There are 3 in total that you see, but in terms of independent behavior that you might be able to see, there are 2 independent stocks, okay, within the SIR model. So you will actually get more complex dynamics and so forth. And in this, you know, the ideas are pretty much the same, but we add one additional feature, which is average duration of infectivity, right? So basically, this is a measure of how long a person stays sick before they recover and enter the recovered stock. How long do you keep your Galaxy 7 before you move on to another phone? Okay, do you keep it for 6 months or do you keep it for a year? That kind of stuff, okay? So that's what this variable is happening. Average duration of infectivity or average duration of adoption, okay? So this basically impacts the recovery rate, how the rate at which the population is entering the stock of the recovered population, all right? So this is the additional sort of variable we introduced in the model. I'm not going to go through the details. This is just to sort of show you, you know, how things work. You know, mathematically, the recovery rate we write as this. and some integrations that you see. The key assumption is that people will remain sick for a certain period of time, and then they will recover and develop immunity. So this is key, in which we assume that once you recover, you don't become infected again. So this is an assumption that we're making. And you can relax those assumptions, make them more complex, and on you go. All right. So some interesting dynamics that appear in the SIR model is the idea of the tipping point. So when does an infection become an epidemic? Right? This is a key question. Or if you're selling your product, when do your small number of adopters become large enough that now the community as a whole is using your product? Right? That's what we care about. Or many other related questions, no matter what your problem of analysis might be. And this is basically, you can determine this mathematically for the mathematical, formulation that I showed you previously, in which essentially the idea is that when your infection rate is higher than the recovery rate, that's when the epidemic will occur. That's the tipping point. You can work out the algebra and find that out. You actually look at it in the closed form and determine that. I won't do that here. That's your homework to do. So you have the equations in the handouts, and for those of you who are curious, basically set the following condition that essentially your infection rate is greater than the recovery rate. And then work out what are the variables defining the infection rate, work out what are the variables defining the recovery rate, and then you can get a nice closed form inequality that will show you that for what values do we get to the tipping point when an infection becomes an epidemic. Basically, it infects a lot more people. And the idea is that if the disease is infecting more people at a rate that is higher than the rate at which people are recovering, then a lot of people will eventually get the disease. But if the people recover faster than the rate at which other people are getting infected, then the disease will just remain limited to a small number of people, but it won't sweep through the population. Basically, that's the idea when you start comparing rates, okay? But the tipping point is a very powerful concept, and it is actually used in public health and so forth to understand. They actually start looking at infectivity for new viruses, Ebola, those things that start coming up, and start seeing how long does it take, and they start taking quarantine measures, because actually when you start limiting C, right, the contact rate, you can really affect the tipping point and so forth. So there are real policy measures and strategies that you can then come up with once you know the dynamics and the specifics of the system that you're dealing with. All right. So here's a little picture showing that, okay, for susceptible populations. So for different values of C, you can see that how the susceptible population falls. You see very high contact rate, but for some low contact rates, you can see that just a few people get this. So this is one simulation. It's not in your handout. This is your homework. So this is just for you to see. All right. So let me wrap up now. Model validation. So I've shown you all these tools and tips and tricks. Introduced basic concepts of system dynamics over the last day and a half. But I do want to leave you with certain certain key messages. One is that as we develop these models, it's very important that we validate them, right? I actually showed this to you earlier, that model validation is a social process, right? And it is only going to be useful if it is transparent to the users and people actually believe in it. And that transparency comes when it is built through negotiations and teamwork. I've already gone through this to you as well, that what are some good rules of modeling. And let me quickly go over some limitations. I mentioned these as well, right? That it's more of an art than a science, okay? And essentially, it aids essentially in our understanding of complexity. So don't use it for detailed operational problems. And I'm going to end with some of these links here that I've put down. Go at your own pace and explore them. There's a whole community of people out there who use systems dynamics, who do research using systems dynamics, who write journal articles, attend conferences, are members of the Systems Dynamics Society. It's a pretty active group. It has been going, so Systems Dynamics Society has been around for several decades. So people who use systems dynamics and write and do research, it's a journal, Systems Dynamics Review, established almost 35 years ago, and so on and so forth. So especially if you want to know what's the latest and greatest methods and techniques, this is a good journal to search through and see what's the latest research and what are the latest approaches being used and so forth. All right. So these are just some links for your information, and you can check them out. And here are some references. So this is the book. Some people were asking me. This is written very nicely. I've drawn heavily from this book, as you saw. I was referencing it for several figures. A Business Dynamics written by Professor John Sturgeon. He's a professor at MIT and MIT Sloan. I took Systems Dynamics from him. He's really, wonderful teacher, and he's written this amazing book. It's about this thick, but it's written extremely well. So it is meant for people who are just beginners, who may not even have any previous extensive background in calculus or quantitative methods. It's written very intuitively. So those of you who are strongly interested in developing your skills, I highly recommend, getting hold of a good book. One good book that I know of I've put in there, but there are many others out there as well. So this is not a plug, but I'm just giving you references if you care to sort of follow this up. So with that, I will end, and thank you very much. So the integrating function, for example, over here, it's essentially doing an integration of the state variable, right? So if you have a star S, right, it's essentially integrating, S of t as 0, right? And essentially whatever your S of tau. Okay, and whatever the other inflows might be in and so forth, right, and outflows. I explained that in detail. But essentially, the box represents an integration of whatever is going on. And it's integrating the net flow. Yes, so this is actually a model, inputs into the model. So you can simulate, control inputs in it. So you can give it a step function. You can give it various inputs to see what it's So it has its limitations. I mean, if you're really going to be doing some serious, analysis and control law design or anything of that sort, systems analysis is really not for that. You'll use MATLAB or more sophisticated software. But for the types of systems in which you are dealing with, one higher level knowledge of the system, right? Where very detailed time behavior perhaps may not be of interest, but high level characteristics are, then it's a good approach. And of course, it's still a class of problems that is It depends on the quality of data, right? So if you have actually good quality data, you can get faithful situations. At the end of the day, it's just really quality of the data. And you're doing the mathematics, right? But at the end of the day, the way the tools work, they start getting clumsy. If you want to do, spectral analysis, or if you want to start with the detail of the features responsible. It's not. Right? So if you're really designing a controller for your sensor, and you want to look at the body parts, it's not just about body parts. So it's really, what you want to do.
Right. So any other questions? I looked at state generally speaking. So we've had like maybe 6 lectures of dynamics and analysis and optimization models. Tomorrow, actually, for example, some lectures will be very concrete case study of these methodologies like cloud. But just for the audience, we also talked about, say, for example, our collaboration with communication, collecting a lot of data, and then our collaboration with collecting a lot of data. How do you go from there to there, right? We have got this sense of data. Now you use these sort of models to create some understanding. And I think in my mind, what it seems to be missing is that a couple of decades back, or maybe even a decade back, people used to complain about that there is no data, there is no data. Now it seems that there is a lot of data, but there is really no insight. So maybe you can say a few words about that.
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. In some sense, we say that this is the golden age of modeling because now we have more data, right, to work with, and things that we couldn't couldn't measure before, now we can, or frequencies we couldn't measure before. So it's really amazing. The role of these models basically comes in, depends on the questions that you're asking. Going back to what I reiterated before, that it really depends on what is the problem that you're trying to solve. And some of these, especially systems dynamics, is very useful when you want to understand feedbacks that are happening. I actually didn't put this slide up in here, and I should have, it didn't occur to me. We've started looking at how water, energy, and food systems are coupled, let's say, right? So what are the feedbacks from agriculture to, let's say, groundwater, and feedbacks from food to agriculture, and feedback from many other variables. And if you want to start understanding them and understanding collective emergent behavior, systems dynamics is actually very well suited to start looking at that. If you want to look at direct input-output impacts, then you can run regressions and you can say, okay, how is our food production changed, or the crop yield has changed over time, and many other things. But if you want to start getting a dynamic sense, looking at a lot of sophisticated data that we now have available, some of these approaches can be used. But again, reverting back to what I said before, it all depends on what it is that you want to do, what it is that you're trying to understand. So going back to some of the examples that I showed earlier, that people have used this for long-term basin planning, right? Because they understand that there's a lot of feedbacks happening in the hydrological system, the social system, and so on and so forth. How do we allocate to agriculture? The system dynamics is actually very nice to work with and understand what the long-term impacts on the system are as a consequence of our actions today. How will that system itself respond, and then come up with some plans on intervention and so forth. So,
I mean, for the students' sake, I think I would recommend that last year's lecture that you gave, it was sort of complimentary to what they actually had a lot of examples from the interface on water resources. And I think both between yourself and Alena, you've covered so much that if the participants can go back and look at those videos, I think they will be very, very accessible and useful.
are they available?
They are available. They're all available.
So I had some questions about, IVMR and so forth. So I mentioned that last year we discussed it, so excellent. So people can go and check that out.